Well, it looks like I got another one for you all today. A twofer. Two for Friday, I guess. Uh, this is one that I've been thinking about for a while. And I don't know, I guess you could say it's confirmed through a couple of videos. Let's just put it this way. It inspired me more to talk about this. This is one that's going to be pretty insulting to certain people. But like I told people, I don't know, a week or so ago, maybe it's been a couple weeks, time is short. And, a lot of people are just, they're dying. They're going into eternity, like constantly, all the time. People that probably don't expect to, the demons are out there. They're manifesting. It's just getting crazier and crazier. So there are two individuals that I'm going to mention by name. Try not to do that too much, but it's gotten to the point where if people listen to these men, their ministries, what have you, they could be incredibly deceived to the point where they may not even know what to believe anymore. And even though reality is slapping us in the face, on a pretty much consistent and constant basis, these guys, they just don't want to address that. They just ignore it. They think there's a way out, I guess, or they think that, I don't know, I can't really put my finger on what they think. I guess it's because of their ideology, their doctrine, their way of thinking, what they promote, the people they promote, the people they talk to, the people that they might go on tour with or associate with. Like I said, going back to the company you keep kind of thing. It's just one of those things that it kind of has to be addressed. So I'm going to talk about two individuals. And this sounds mean, but we've all heard the term useful idiots or useless idiots, but useful idiots. And what is a useful idiot? Well, a useful idiot is someone that is being used, whether they know it or not, to serve someone else's purpose, to serve someone else's goals. All right, I don't know. Think about a mafia movie, a mobster movie or something like that, or maybe even historically speaking, Lee Harvey Oswald, or someone like that they serve a purpose for a period of time, then they get rid of them. They're led to believe that whatever purpose they're serving is for a great cause, and it's greater than themselves, and that they will either be remembered or appreciated, or they will just feel that because of brainwashing or what have you, their ideology, their way of thinking, they believe in their hearts that what they're doing is right, even if it means taking someone else's life, or even if it means, martyring themselves, like in a certain religion, or religions, they think that whatever they do is for a greater purpose or cause, and they justify it by saying, that it's greater than themselves, that they're serving a cause greater than themselves. Well, these two useful idiots, in my opinion, okay, like I said, this sounds mean, but this is what I got, okay, are Stan Johnson of the Prophecy Club and Lance Wallnau. Those are the two people that I can think of the most about this. And it probably has something to do with the fact, regarding Lance Wallnau anyway, that I watched a video earlier from Maurice Braxton of Evangelism for God, And he did a very, very good job basically using Lance Wallnau against Lance Wallnau, you know, condemned by his own words. And I'm sure people know who these people are. You've probably heard them. Maybe you even watched them. Maybe you listened to them. You've gone on their broadcasts. You've gone on their channels or what have you. And you have, hopefully you haven't supported them. But I can't think of two people that have been more of a cheerleader for the cause of this regime, administration, dumpster fire, you know, and everything that it's about and it supports and everything that it's brought upon the American people and even the world, and specifically what they, you know, what's referred to as illegal aliens, you know, or immigrants or what have you, or just people of color, people of a different creed, nationality, people that whether they came here legally, illegally, but they've just tried to make a life. They're not, they would say, oh, you're criminals because you crossed the border. Okay, I get all that, but they're decent human beings, what I'm saying. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that aren't. There's a lot of criminals out there that aren't, but they're just not illegals. I mean, look at the mother that just killed her son in Kentucky. You know, I mean, demons are everywhere. They're all shapes, colors, sizes, sexes. You know, you don't have to be an illegal, you know, to be, you know, or not even belong in this country legally to be a demon, okay? That's ridiculous. And that's what Stan Johnson has said before, okay? And I've called him out before on it because I even made a video about it saying illegal demons, you know? He called people illegal demons, you know, like the high school student, you know, that gets arrested. He may not be here legally because his folks came over illegally or what have you, but I mean, he's lived here his whole life, you know, and he gets arrested, detained for a weekend or whatever, and he spends that whole weekend, just like in the New Testament, you know, preaching, teaching, asking for Bibles, you know, trying to lead people to the Lord. Yeah, that's something an illegal demon would do, right? I mean, so people, they judge people by the color of their skin, their creed, their nationality, their beliefs, whatever else, whether they're here legally or illegally. But I got to tell you, there was another video that was put out. I'll get back to Stan and Lance in a minute. But by Josh of End Times Talk. And, I mean, he really put himself out there because he called out the date setters. You know, he called out the date setters, and he's a staunch pre-trib guy, you know, like a lot of people that will go on his channel and listen to him or whatever. But he puts out a lot of really good information. And I got to give him credit because he called out the date setters, all these people that are looking for a rapture on this date and that date. Now, I don't agree with all of his beliefs. He believes that Jesus could return at any time. I don't. Matter of fact, I believe that Jesus doesn't even know when he's returning because the Bible says only the Father knows. I know people say, oh, you're taking that out of the context, or that's not true, or you're misreading or misinterpreting that. I don't think so. That's what I believe. I believe that Jesus will return when the Father sends him, okay? And I don't think it can happen today or tomorrow or whatever, but if other people believe that, whatever. Whatever floats your boat, set your sail, whatever else, you know? But I admire his video, just like Maurice's, because they didn't hold back. They didn't pull any punches. And, you know, this date setting is ridiculous. And this this philosophy, this idea of, you know, how do I say it? People making a living off of that by doing their videos and so forth, and you know, while still begging instead of getting a real job or whatever. I mean, I've beaten this dead horse many times, but it just keeps coming back up. You know, it can really hurt people in the long run, you know, because they believe this date, they believe that date, this is going to happen here and that's going to happen there. And especially for someone that's new in the faith, you know, believing in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, and they haven't been discipled properly, and they're not listening to people that can help them and give them the truth and they're not, reading the Word or studying the Word or learning themselves, it can really mess people up. Well, as far as I know, Lance Wallnau and Stan Johnson are not, date setters. Okay, as a matter of fact, Stan Johnson has changed his position from a post-trib guy to a pre-wrath or whatever. And I don't necessarily agree with what Josh said about that. But, he said, they changed their position from this to sugarcoat it. Or I don't remember exactly what he said regarding that. But something like he just thought it was kind of like a cop-out. And I say, I don't know that I necessarily agree with all that. But that's fine. Whatever. Everybody has their opinions and their beliefs on things. And that's fine. But both Lance Wallnau and Stan Johnson have been incredibly supportive of this regime administration, the little tin god, the orange man, the dumpster, whatever people want to call him, the president, whatever. Okay. Unbelievably supportive. Like, it's almost like he doesn't sin, or if he does, it's okay and it's excused, and because he's doing the best he can, kind of thing. And they will not entertain for a second that anything that anybody would send them or try to show them or to prove to them that not only is the dude repeatedly in the Epstein files, but it's bad. I mentioned it again, the Katie Johnson interview, the other accusations, or I don't even want to say accusations, the other evidence, the proof, the testimonies that other women have had the courage to talk about and to be interviewed and to tell the truth. They wouldn't even entertain that. They wouldn't even think that would be possible. Why? Because specifically Lance Wallnau, the useful idiot Lance Wallnau, he is so much, I would almost even call him like the father of Christian nationalism. He is so much into this, the Seven Mountain Mandate, the NAR, the New Apostolic Reformation, all of this New Age garbage, that he truly believes that, by making this nation Christian again, like that's even possible, okay? But by making this nation Christian again, that, you can hasten the return of Jesus Christ. But you can even do it in a militant way. Now, he's not necessarily calling for arms or whatever, but I wouldn't say that he's against it, because this Christian nationalism movement, it is very, very militant. And it's something that, it's just like patriotism to the extreme, where it's like Jesus is a punchline or an afterthought. And they would never say that. They would say, oh, no, Jesus is our God, and we love Jesus, and this and that. But they're militant about it. Their patriotism trumps, pun intended, their beliefs, their Christian beliefs, their beliefs, their faith in Jesus. They would deny this repeatedly. And you know how I know it's true, though? Because if anybody is still trapped in this left-right paradigm, and, they constantly fall for the Hegelian dialectic, of, problem, reaction, solution, and all of this deception, and they promote it. They promote Christian nationalism, whether they say it or not. Lance Wallnau definitely does. Like I said, I would call him like the father of it, practically. Okay? To the point where it becomes their religion, it becomes their belief system, then I would have to say that these two individuals are really far gone in their faith, at where they may have started out at one time. Now, I don't know about Lance Wallnau, but I know about Stan Johnson. And I have listened to him and watched him off and on for like the last 10 years. And this dude has pretty much lost it. I think he's one of those guys that started out well, but he's not finishing well. And I mentioned that before. And he's become a useful idiot for this regime. He really has, because he continually pushes the regime. He continually pushes the dumpster. He continually pushes his agenda, the dumpster's agenda. I mean, the narrative. He continually pushes all of this, and still talks about Democrats and Republicans, and still talks about the right and the left, and really pushes the mass arrest thing. And I'm thinking to myself, useful idiots, because what you don't realize is why you want all of these evil people in your mind. And I'm not saying they're not evil. There's a lot of scumbags out there. Politics, entertainment industry, sports industry, professional sports industry, sports entertainment, music, whatever. Okay, politics, obviously. There's a lot out there. I'm not saying these people aren't evil, but it's just like, yeah, we're going to mass arrest, and that's what's going on in D.C. now, and that's why we're deploying all these troops, because they're going to go into Congress, and they're going to arrest all these people, and they're going to hold them accountable for all their sins and all their crimes and whatever else. And I'm just thinking to myself, And these are the people that would definitely support Alligator Alcatraz, and I guess they're building something in Indiana, maybe, talking about the real Alcatraz in San Francisco and all the. They would definitely support all that, getting the illegal demons off the streets, confining them to, less than humane conditions, where they get diseases and illnesses and may even die in captivity. These so-called Christian believers, and people that they promote and support not only Christian nationalism, but the dumpster to the point where he's almost godlike, whether they want to admit it or not. They have no problem at all with people being constantly oppressed, detained, arrested, and it was Maurice Braxton's video, or no, who was it? No, it was Sister Kathleen. That was another one. Sister Kathleen that really put out a very good video. I actually shared this one about, people being oppressed, and what the Bible says about do not oppress the stranger, the sojourner, the person in your land, reminding the Israelites. People say, well, that was the Old Testament. That doesn't apply to today. Are you sure about that? Because there's a verse in Hebrews too. I can't remember exactly where it is right now, that I think has something similar about that. Don't quote me on that, but I think there is. But anyway, even if it is just the Old Testament, so what? Okay, it's in the Bible. It's in the whole Bible, okay? So even if it is just in the Old Testament, where God is reminding the Israelites, the Jews of the time, it's just like, you were once a stranger in a land too, in Egypt and whatnot. Remember how you were treated as slaves and oppressed? So you want to do this to the people that come to your land, you don't oppress people. It goes back to the golden rule. There it is in the New Testament right there. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Do unto others as you'd have done unto you. Who is your neighbor? The Good Samaritan parable, right? Samaritans hated Jews. Jews hated Samaritans, but it was the Samaritan that stopped, that helped the man, right? Everybody else was, too busy, holier than thou, didn't want to get their hands dirty or bloodied or anything else, basically mocked him to the point where it's like, well, you shouldn't have gone here by yourself, and, and you deserve what happened to you or whatever. But it was the Samaritan that had compassion, right? So, but these so-called preachers, teachers, men of God or whatever, they have no problem with oppressing the stranger. Just listen to them. Listen to them. Don't take my word for it. Listen to them. Go to a Prophecy Club video and listen. If you can stomach it, just listen. And you'll hear how it's not frowned upon to oppress the stranger. That somehow American exceptionalism is comparable to Christianity, is comparable to a faith and belief in Jesus Christ. And and with the video that Sister Kathleen put out, that's the name of her channel, she calls herself, I was just like, yeah, this is really good, because she used a lot of scripture in her video talking about not oppressing the stranger. And Maurice Braxton, like I said, he used Lance Wallnau against Lance Wallnau, to, his own words. He's condemned by his own words, by the things that he says. And the reason I'm mentioning Stan Johnson is because, full disclosure, way back in June of 2015, when I first started to get like a pretty decent clue about what's going on in the world and all of this chaos and everything. And granted, I thought things were going to happen a whole lot sooner than they have. I've been, basically telling people for the last 10 years, on social media sites and what have you, and even personally and in video format, interview format, whatever else. The stuff that's happening now, going on now, I've been telling people about that for like the last 10 years, off and on. So it doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is that it hadn't happened sooner. That's what surprised me. I thought it was going to happen a long time ago. And the reason for that is because, when I first started to wake up, one of the very first things I in my studies, in my research that I came across was the Prophecy Club. Because I'd never heard of Dimitri Duduman, Henry Gruver, a lot of the people of the past that have, gone, they have passed away by now. Henry Gruver just a few years ago, but Dimitri Duduman way back in the 90s. I'd never heard this story. I'd never heard this testimony. I'd never heard these prophecies. They didn't teach that in the Baptist church, the Assemblies of God church, the community church, the non-denominational church. These were the churches I went to. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know. I was completely ignorant to all of it. So I was fascinated by these things. I'm like, wow, there are people that claim to have seen these things, and they talk about it, and they give prophecy or testimony to it, and they say they were visited by angels, or they got words of knowledge and wisdom from the Lord. I was blown away. I mean, I'd heard of prophecy and healing and things of that nature, and people had said some things, where it kind of made me wonder at times. I'm like, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, and I was kind of naive and gullible to the point where I'd probably believe, well, if someone claimed to be a man or a woman of God, and they were trusted by the pastor in the church or whatever, and if they had some kind of prophecy or word, then we're supposed to listen to it straight up, and believe it. I didn't know about testing the spirits at the time. I just wasn't familiar with that. I kind of was one of these people that believed pretty much my whole life that what the pastor said was true. I trusted the pastor, whoever it was, whatever church my parents took me to, or when I got older, and I would go or whatever, I would just believe that no way could they be lying. No way could they not know what they're talking about. I mean, come on, they're behind the pulpit there. They've been to seminary, and they've had this Bible teaching and college and schooling, and they're so much smarter than me, and they know so much more than I do. And I mean, they couldn't be wrong. That's the way I thought for a long, long time. And you may have thought the same way. But then in 2015, man, like I said, the Holy Spirit just shook me, woke me up in such a way that I didn't know that it was possible. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. I just didn't. I guess I just didn't expect it. Let's put it. It was unexpected. And I'm not saying that he necessarily led me to the Prophecy Club or anything like that, but I just needed my eyes opened. I needed to be more red-pilled, for lack of a better term. I was clueless. I was just dumb. I was ignorant to a lot of things. Well, when around that same time, Stan Johnson had done a video called 2 Cows and 13 Prophecies or something like that. And it was kind of a perfect timing thing where it was a very long video and a DVD, and he put this thing out, and it sounded very, very legitimate. Because this was in June of 2015, and it was around that time that we were dealing with Jade Helm. And a lot of people, including myself, thought that this could be a really, really big deal. Because if you remember who was in office at the time, and they were like shredding the Constitution, and it looked like we were losing our freedoms and our rights. And I was thinking, man, this could be a really big deal. Well, it was September of 2014. This was very interesting that there were 2 cows born, and people may remember this. And it was supposedly at a Shemitah year, and September of 2014, where there was this black and white cow that was born, and it had like a really nice printed 7 on its forehead. People might remember this. If not, you could look it up. And so it was black and white cow, and there was a white 7 on its forehead, pretty good size 7. And the people that owned the cow, they named it Ben after the quarterback of the Steelers at the time, Pittsburgh Steelers at the time, Ben Roethlisberger, right? And well, around the same time, I think they were both born in Texas too, I believe, if I recall. But then there was a red heifer that was born, and mostly red but a little white, and then it had a white 7 on its forehead, but it was much smaller. Wasn't as big as the other one, and you couldn't see it as well. I mean, it just wasn't as legible, but you could see that it was a 7. So the people that, I guess, believe that they got a vision, a word from the Lord on this, and it sounded very legitimate, believe that meant for 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Well, the 7 years of plenty, would be, 2014 to 2021, basically, where those would be the last 7 years of America's most plentiful days. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, amber waves of grain kind of thing, okay? Those would be our best days. And then after that, from 2022 to 2028, we would have our 7 years of famine, which people would probably think would be the Great Tribulation period or what have you, okay? I believe this. I think quite a few people believed it because it seemed true. It seemed legitimate. It made a lot of sense. It's like, why would God have these cows born at this particular time in America? I think both were in Texas, and then the black and white cow, like if your books are in the black, that means you're doing well financially. Your books are in the red, you're bankrupt, basically. So it kind of made sense that they would be born within a few days from each other in September of 2014, kind of in the fall of that year. So 2014 to 2021 would be your 7 years of plenty. 2022, 2028 would be your 7 years of famine, Well, it turns out that's probably not true. I mean, I guess it's debatable when you look at the economy overall, but we're not exactly in a complete and total famine yet. Headed there, but not yet. Now, it's only 2025, obviously, but the time frame was 2014 to 2021, then 2022 to 2028. So I found that very intriguing. And then there were supposedly like 13 prophecies that backed it up from a lot of different people. Terry Bennett was one, and I can't remember the others. It's been a long time, but, that claimed that, okay, this confirms all of this. And so I'm thinking at the time, I'm like, all right, well, this is very interesting, very intriguing, and this could actually be true. Well, Stan Johnson was the one that did the DVD, and it made a lot of sense. It really did at that time. They talked about a new currency. They talked about a lot of different things. And like I said, at the time Obama was in office, it made a lot of sense. It wasn't exactly good times in America with him being in office. People recall, okay, 2008. Well, that was actually Bush, to the end Bush, but you know what I'm saying. But anyway, we were not as financially blessed, let's put it that way, during those times. And we did lose a lot of our constitutional rights to a certain extent. And then there was gay marriage introduced and so forth and so on. But anyway, at the time, the people we'd have on his program, the things he was talking about, the other things I was researching, it made a lot of sense to me, But now here we are 10 years later from that time, And now this is a guy, you know, that he's all about money and crypto and begging for money, and he wants to go to Pakistan and needs money for that, and they're doing a prophetic conference at the end of September or beginning of September. They need money for that, and they're always in the red, and they always need money, and money. It's always about money. But it's not just about money, it's also about pushing the right and the left and the Democrats and the Republicans and the whole, you know, paradigm and that whole ideology. And it's like, dude, you're a useful idiot. Because what do you think is going to happen to you, your ministry? I know you think that there's going to be great revival in the land, and there's stadiums are going to be filled, and there's not going to be NFL anymore, and all the rest of this stuff. And, you know, I get all that. John Paul Jackson, I get it. But, okay, whatever. If you think there's enough time for that, you think there's going to be revival after all this chaos and insanity, and stadiums will be filled and all that. Okay, if that's what you're shooting for, whatever. But who do you think's going to be arrested, though? Who do you really think's going to be arrested and detained? Who do you look at the Bible? Not prophecy, not what Joe Schmo says, or this prophet, or that person, this person. Who do you really think is going to be arrested? You keep putting up these videos, mass arrest. Who do you think are going to be the ones that really get arrested in the end? The useful idiots like you and Lance Wallnau. You're going to be betrayed. You're going to be betrayed because the people out there are Judases, man. They're going to use you for as long as they need to use you. And then they're going to toss you away like yesterday's garbage. And you're going to be the one that's arrested. Christianity is not going to endure. Okay? It's going to be the beast system until Jesus returns. And what's interesting is it's like Stan, for instance, talks out of both sides of his mouth. You know, it's just like, yeah, we got Dimitri Duduman and the internal revolution and this and that. But he thinks that the mass arrests are going to be, you know, all the congressmen and the senators or whatever. And it's like the internal revolution. The people are going to start fighting against the government. Well, yeah, we're seeing that now. We're seeing the beginning of that now. But who do you really think is going to be public enemy number one? I mean, after they're done, you know, with the illegal detention and arrest of, you know, the illegals or legals, and, you know, in many cases, people that just look different than us, you know, after they're done with all of that, who do you think they're going after next? You know, it's kind of like nobody cares. I think Sister Kathleen said this, maybe someone else, but no one cares if it's not their family. It's like, well, yeah, they're arresting these people, throwing them in Alligator Alcatraz, and we celebrate that. We think that's great. We're getting rid of the illegals. We're detaining them, arresting them, you know, long term, putting them in these facilities or whatever. It's like, yeah, because it's not you, because it's not your family. This arrogance and this pride of this American exceptionalism, where people forget that we all bleed red and we're all human beings, you know. What happens when it's you? What happens when it's your family? What happens when it's your church? What happens when it's your, you know, friends, your coworkers, the people you care about, you know, because they're a different color, a different religion, a different race, a different this or that. Will people care then? I don't know. But eventually it's going to be the Christians, the believers in Jesus Christ that are detained. They're going to be the ones that are in the camps. They're going to be the ones that are in the prisons. So be careful not to be a useful idiot like Stan Johnson and Lance Wallnau, you know, because as they preach this gospel of American exceptionalism, Christian nationalism, you know, and let's detain all the illegals and get rid of all these people and all these crooked politicians and these evil people and these Satanists and these globalists. Hey, listen, I'm all for that, okay? Yeah, let's get rid of, yeah, absolutely. You know, arrest all this scum that hurt children, pedophiles, perverts, or whatever. But look within the own dumpster fire regime first. Okay? Look within first. Look within your own church. Look within your own congregation. Look within, I hate to say it, but your own family, you know, your own circle of friends or whatever. You better know, again, the company you keep. You better know who you're hanging out with, who you're supporting, you know, who you're doing your dealings with, your business dealings with, and everything else. You better look within first, you know. And then that way, hopefully you don't get caught off guard. But these people out there, Stan Johnson, Lance Wallnau, and there's a ton more, all these false prophets, false watchmen, false this, false that. There's a ton of them, They all promote this Christian nationalism, NAR, Seven Mountain Mandate garbage, and then they also basically promote the dumpster in his regime. Like, it can never do anything wrong. It's never guilty. Everybody's just always against them, falsely accusing them. All these women are liars. All the people that come forward are all liars. And and if you say anything against the dumpster fire regime, or anything like this, then you're evil and you're bad, and you just don't get with the program, and you don't understand what's going on, and and you're blue-pilled or whatever else. And it's just like, no, those are the people that do understand what's going on, because they've taken the blinders off, and they've seen the truth for what it is, and they're willing to see the truth and accept the truth for what it is, and they don't stick to some Christian nationalism agenda and American exceptionalism, like this country and its and its leadership can never do any wrong. I mean, but that's what you get when a lot of the churches out there support this kind of garbage, this American exceptionalism, MAGA garbage that the preachers, teachers, whatever, promote behind the pulpit. And they are. So you have the two useful idiots at the top of the food chain, in my opinion, and then have all these others, false prophets or whatever else, because they may have a bigger audience that they preach to or prophesy to or whatever else. But those are the two that come to mind more than anyone else, because it seems like that they promote it, push it the most, beg the most. I mean, a lot of these people beg. None of them work a real job, I don't think, ever. But maybe they did at one time in their life, a long time ago. But they're maybe too old now, probably, they think, or, they're just too successful. But anyway, there's a lot underneath them. But, you have this hierarchy, this of the Christian nationalists, American exceptionalism, MAGA people, then they're prophets and teachers or whatever else, generals, people that, push all this garbage, Clay Clark and what's his face, Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk and all the rest of these people, constantly pushing it on everybody, Ben Shapiro, whatever, And then at the very bottom, you kind of have the church, where you have the small town pastor, preacher, or whatever that buys into all this garbage, won't preach the truth. There are a few out there that will, but most of them, they're like the grassroots movement of this whole thing. So I'm done now, but this thing is dangerous. This thing is really, really dangerous. This Christian nationalism, American exceptionalism, MAGA stuff. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so don't be a useful idiot, don't be a pawn in this game. Hopefully your family is not a useful, family members who are useful idiots and pawns in this game and proselytizing this garbage out, preaching this fake, false gospel. I mean, and like I said, people need to look within. We all need to look within. Who is the company you keep? Who are the people you hang out with? Who are the people you support? Who are the people you promote? I mean, I got to do that. I think we all have to do that. We all have a responsibility, and as I said, that's why I said full disclosure. 10 years ago, I believed a lot of this stuff, but now it's 10 years later. I've learned a lot. I've listened to a lot. Hopefully I've matured and grown and so forth. And now I kind of, I think I'm a little more, I guess you could say, what's the word? I don't want to say balanced, because that makes you sound mentally unstable. but let's just say, I guess my eyes have been opened to the point now where it's just like I just see it for what it is, man. Evil is evil in anyone's name. I'm going back to other videos I've done, but it's all coming full circle. You know, evil is evil in anyone's name. And I mean, and you got to see the truth for what it is. And even if it's one of your heroes or somebody you really admire and respect, remember, we're all human. We all bleed. We're all fallible. We all bleed red. We're all fallible. And some of these people, they truly are evil. They really, really are. They're just very good at deception. You know? Yeah. It's a bad movie. And there's bad actors, but some of these people are really good at deception. They're experts at deception. So don't fall for it. All right, that's it. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.